record this. Okay, there we go. It's Friday, and the reality is everybody wants to like get a move on today. So we're gonna bomb through this, okay? Everybody good? Okay.
Absolutely.
All righty. So, if you ever are like, hey, Carrie, slow down. Hey, I have a question. I really want this to be interactive and I want it to be really beneficial for you. So we're going to do some talking, but really the main thing I want to do is go through a purchase agreement with you. Okay. So let's just start at the beginning. And now I'm going to give you, can you guys all see that?
Yep.
Okay. Sometimes you're like, I'm pretty sure I got this going on right. I'm not totally sure. Okay. Let's see if we can get a full screen here. Oh, well, we're going to go with this. Okay. Oop. So somebody wants to get in. Good grief, Charlie Brown. Okay. Making and receiving offers. That's what we're doing today. Let's get started. So expectations, obviously, have you guys been keeping up with all your homework? Yes? No?
Trying to for the most part.
Trying to for the most part. You guys, I will tell you, when they started allowing us to text to count those as contacts, game changer, right? Like you can bomb out some contacts pretty quickly. So, and this is another good time of year to write those notes, right? Hey, just wanted to tell you I'm thankful for you. Or, you know, a little note about heading into the season, or, oh my goodness, I can't believe it snowed already. Hope you're doing okay. Something like that, right? So sometimes you have to remember, like, just be a real person. You don't need to like be businessy all the time. People want to build that relationship with you. So don't forget about that. Okay, sorry, you guys. You're seeing all kinds of funny things here, right? Are you seeing this where I've got everybody on here? Yes, no? How do I get everybody off?
I just see the slideshow.
You can see the slideshow. Okay, perfect. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, so I think what I want to do is start. I've asked this question. I want us to go here. So how many of you have visited homes this week? Yes, no? Pop in and just say yes.
I haven't yet, but I've got 2 lined up for this afternoon.
Okay, how's everybody else doing?
I had 4 homes that I was showing a client this week.
Nice. Okay, the easiest homes to go and preview where you don't feel like you're putting someone out are those vacant homes, you guys. So, or new construction, or, because sometimes, I don't know about you, but I kind of go, okay, I got to visit homes, but you don't want to put out a family, right? Or someone who's trying to have put their kids down for a nap. So there are definitely a lot of vacant homes out there that you could go see if you needed to, or talk to one of us realtors. I'm going to go show a townhome this afternoon. If somebody wants to tag along, you let me know. Okay. So, all right. So we're going to go down to lead generation. So I know some of you are only here for a little bit. Have your other instructors been giving you the 15 minutes to jump in and get some work done this morning? Yes, no?
Yeah, they
Some
usually
have.
do.
Yeah, some have. Otherwise, they've asked us if we just want to do that afterwards.
Well, do you want to do that afterward?
I would rather do it afterwards.
Tyler, you're just running the show here. I love it. Okay, let's do it afterward. Let's talk about offers. So I'm going to get to page, I'm going to have to scoot on. Page 9. Everybody on page 9? In fact, yes. I'm going to change this up a little bit. We're going to stop sharing for a sec. We're going to see each other. Hi, Megan. Good morning. Megan gets to teach what, Monday, I think?
You were already unmuted.
Yeah, I think it's Wednesday. I do the last one before the.
Okay, so we're going to start on page 9, getting our head in the game. So here's what I want you guys to remember. Sometimes people think of realtors as like these hard nosed, we're pushing deals through. And I mean, there are some like that, right? But I want you to think of it this way. It's a dance, it's not a fight, okay? Because we're all getting in the boat together. And if we don't work well together, there's enough things that could go sideways without having there be like some bad feelings on how you communicate or how you deal with the other people that are in the boat. Okay, so it's a dance, it's not a fight. So arriving at the offer stage. So we've done all the showings and we've got all our contracts signed, and now we're ready to write an offer on a place. Okay, so what's really important, I'm going to show you something real quick that I like to do. Before I take people out, I have this little thing I put together, and it's called the buying process, okay? And a lot of times buyers go, okay, I get that there's a lot of signing going on. I get, I know we go look at houses, but sometimes people want to see the big picture. So on one page, I've created these are the steps to buying a house. We go through them so that they have a little bit better of an idea of what's coming down the pipe. Now, I'll tell you something. Living in a town like Rochester, where you have a lot of nurses, doctors, tech people, I call them my spreadsheet people, okay? So they like to know scope and sequence. So if you walk in going, look, it's important for me that you know the process, not just we're buying a house, they appreciate that. I give them questions for their lender. Okay, really important to say, obviously you need to speak to a lender before we make an offer. And oftentimes when you're sitting down with the buyer, this can be an intimidating piece because they don't know much about lending. They're not sure what their credit score is. Oh my goodness, what if I don't get pre-approved? So you need to say, look, here are the questions for your lender. And all that does is it gives you the language of lending, okay? What you really need to do is call your lender, and I'll give you some options, okay? It's like calling, I usually call 3. And I always say, not every lender can offer the same program, right? When you go to the mall, not every store has the same white t-shirt, okay? So call a few different lenders, and you just need to lead with the question, hey, I'm thinking of buying a home. What do you have to offer? Where do I start? So the lender at that point should take over, okay? So, but this helps so that they know some of the terms that might come up. And then the last thing, this is really, really, really important, because there are so many things that can go sideways in a deal, you want to get ahead of those things. So here are the things, I call it things you should not do. And so we go through this, and you can go through it when you sit down initially. And then after you write that offer and it gets accepted, you go through it again. Look at this one right here. Don't co-sign for anything, right? That's super important. So what if your daughter comes to you in the middle of a transaction and says, hey, I need you to co-sign for a student loan? Well, now if you say, oh, yeah, great, because I love you so much, I'm going to do that. And you totally forget that you're in the middle of a real estate transaction. And then 3 days before closing, when your mortgage guy or gal goes back and looks at your debt you've incurred, makes sure you're still working the same job, makes sure your credit score hasn't changed significantly. Now suddenly they're like, oh, well, why is there $18,000 more debt? Now you might not qualify for the loan. So that's just an example of things that you need to go through right after you write that offer and it gets accepted, okay? Part of my packet has frequently asked questions. I don't read these all. There's like 31 of them, okay? But I always say you're going to have questions at 11:30 at night. And before you think of calling me, look at this. And then if you still didn't find your answer, call me the next day, okay? So, and then there's just some extra things on the end. But I just wanted you guys to see that because it's important that they know what they're getting into, they know the process, and you're creating expectations, right? So
So can you, is that available anywhere, or could you like email that to me so I can have like a template and make my own?
You could. I made it. So, but here, let me grab my piece of paper. Now, who asked that question?
I did, Nick.
Oh,
Crum.
Nick. I
Yeah.
didn't see who lit up. Okay. And here's the other deal, you guys. Anytime that, what do you have for resources you can share? I also have a checklist. So if I'm doing a listing, here's the checklist all the way through the transaction of things. Not only here's the ordering the pictures, here's the staging. Did you order a sign? But every time there's an amendment, did you send it to the lender and the title company? All those little pieces that are really easy to overlook. Come see me. I've got a checklist for working with a buyer and a seller. As a new agent, it's invaluable. And if you have multiple deals going on at one time, you kind of go, did I send this to that person? Did I not? And so much real estate happens at 10 o'clock at night when your brain is kind of half dead. You wake up in the morning and you don't remember what you've done or not done, right? At least maybe me, I don't know. So checklists for me are really good. So reach out.
Awesome.
Yep, reach out to me and I will get you those resources.
Yeah, that'd be really great. Thank you very much, Carrie.
Yep, absolutely. And seriously, if you're ever in the office, just swing by. And I've got a file cabinet I'll share whatever with. So, okay, let's get back into, we're ready to make an offer. So this is one of those times, you guys, can be kind of emotional, right? So think about it this way. There's two sides to every transaction, at least two. We'll focus on two. There's the number side, and then there's the emotions. Do you know what I'm talking about? Right? And we have to manage both of those.
Oops, sorry.
Pardon me? I thought somebody had said something. So you have to recognize, why are emotions running high for buyers? Jump in.
It's a big deal buying a house. It's a lot of money. It's a big decision.
Yeah. Do both buyers always agree 100%?
No.
Have you ever had almost fights in the driveway between a husband and a wife? Because one really wants it and one really doesn't? And then you stand there and you're like, okay, now I'm putting on my psychology counselor hat. And we're going to do a little bit of management of the emotions. And I would say this, Megan, you might want to jump in. I would say at least 50% of what we do is managing emotions.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
For sure.
That's a good way to put that.
For sure. So just understand that. And you kind of have to have your finger on the pulse. And when you find that like there's a little bit of tension or whatever, you need to kind of go, all right, let me give you some perspective. Okay. So husband is like not liking a house. Wife is like, you don't like anything that we go to see. But you have to go, now remember, patience is the name of the game. And do you remember there was a house that you both liked, but you lost out in multiples or whatever the issue was. So you kind of have to bring it back and go, look, go home, take a deep breath. The right house will come on, and make sure you've got right expectations, right? That you're not going to find an HGTV home. I tell my buyers, I'm like 80, 10, 10, 80% you're going to love, 10% you can change, 10% you can live with. Okay. There is no perfect house. So we're going to get as many of the boxes checked as possible. And you're going to have to be okay with what are the things that we can live with. Okay. Jumping into the offer. We are going to look at this slide. We're going to make the offer. Seller gets to respond one of three ways. Accept the offer, down here, counter the offer, or reject the offer. What would be a reason that a seller would reject the offer?
Price is too low.
Yep, lowball. What's another reason?
Contingencies that they are not willing to accept.
Yep. Yep, exactly. So sometimes there are things that come up that you're like, hey, there's not even negotiation in this. Sometimes you'll have a buyer where they're going to have to be rejected a few times before they realize what you're telling them is actually true. If they're thinking, I mean, I had somebody tell me one time, so my uncle in South Dakota said that we need to, when we make an offer, we need to put a funny number there. Like, I'm going to offer $215,089 or something, like just totally like that made them look like nut jobs, right? Like where you're like, this is, okay, let me give you a little bit of a reality check for this advice that you were given. Sometimes people come with advice from their buying committee, and everyone has a buying committee, and that's okay. But they don't always understand that their advice from what happened to their transaction in Iowa doesn't translate to what's happening in Rochester here, okay? So always take what they come to you with and say, that's great advice. Yeah, absolutely. Or to say, I'm just gonna be honest with you, that's probably not gonna fly in this market, okay? So here's what we're gonna do to prepare to write the offer. So page 13. So if you see a house, you guys, and you get in the car and you're like, hey, we're heading back to the office to write an offer, there are 2 people you need to call. Who do you need to call and just touch base with before you write an offer for your clients? Who do you think? You need to call the lender, right? You should already have a pre-approval letter, but you want to call your lender and say, hey, we've identified a quick run the numbers for us. Okay, I'm gonna let someone in here. Quick run the numbers for us, and let me just make sure I understand the kind of offer we have to write. And one of the things that you want to ask is, it's my understanding that they're putting 5% down, right? What's one of the questions you need to ask your lender? Not only how much are they putting down, what's another really important question you want to ask the lender? What do you think? Do they need closing costs? Okay, do they have the cash on hand to pay for closing, all the costs at closing, or are we going to have to somehow roll that into the deal? All right, so that you're going to call the lender. And then you're going to call the listing agent and you're going to say, hey, we have a serious interest and we're looking to bring an offer. Okay. What else do you think you need to ask that listing agent?
Are there any other offers pending?
Yep. Well, I wouldn't use the word pending.
Have you received
any other offers on the table? Yeah. Any other offers on the table? What else would you ask them?
If for the disclosures, if they were not part of the listing.
Yep, if they weren't online, you definitely want those disclosures. What else would a listing agent be able to tell you? What's an ideal close date for your seller, right? Are there any other things that would make this offer strong? And let's say, like Melanie said, she's going to ask, are there any other offers? And if she says yes, I would say, when are you presenting those offers? Because if they're saying, oh, 8 o'clock tonight, okay, we got to get on it, right? If they say we're going to present at 10 tomorrow morning, then I know we've got the evening and we don't have to maybe hoof it quite so hard, right? So that's really important to know. One of the other things I always ask too is, let's say it's Thursday night and I can see on the MLS that they have got open houses scheduled for Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And I would say, if we bring a strong offer Thursday night, would your seller be willing to cancel the open houses and accept our offer? Okay. Helps you know how motivated they are. So what you don't want is to get into multiples. Multiples are hard and the emotions run really high. Okay, they're not insurmountable, but I'm just saying, if you can think of all the ways to avoid the multiples, that would be really good. So Any other questions about that?
I have a question really quick.
Yeah.
How often do you, if ever, come across agents like saying that they have other offers and don't, or, you know, kind of trying to inflate things on their end? Or is that like not a typical practice? I mean, obviously I would never do that. I'm just curious if like that's something that you encounter in real estate.
Yep. And you know, that can be a little tricky because you kind of want to go, well, prove it, like show me another offer, right? But, and I suppose you could do that. You could say, hey, like, I don't know, Megan, how would you get proof there's another offer?
I've actually been asked that by buyers, and they're like, well, how do we know they're not just saying that to
Right.
offer more? And do you see the other offers? And the answer that I tell them is no. And there's a certain amount of trust that we have to have in
Yeah.
the realtors. And
that's what I say too.
I've worked with this realtor before. I know that they're ethical.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I've got one offer on the table. I have 2 more coming in, but we know for sure he has 1.
Yeah. And if somebody
You would just
says,
say by default, maybe just trust your fellow agents, and it's not necessarily like a dishonest item.
well, you
for
would sure hope it wouldn't be, right? You would sure hope that our code of ethics would rule the day.
Right.
And so, yeah, I would just say we have a code of ethics that we have to follow. And I had an agent say last week, they said, look, we wrote an offer one day and they had a whole bunch of, hey, I think I'm getting an offer tomorrow. And she said, the agent on the other side said, look, there's a lot of interest buzzing around this. I do not have another offer in hand. But if you want us to stop the show, here's what my seller is asking you to do. Are you willing to do that? So there was no other offer in hand at that point. I also had another deal I did this week where I had somebody write an offer and he said, let me know if you get others coming in. And I did. I got a text saying, hey, I've got another offer coming in. So I let him know. And he said, well, call me or text me when you have it in hand. And that's a really good thing to do, right? Because you want to not just hit the panic button because at the last minute, they might change their mind. So ask that agent to let you know when they have that offer actually in hand. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. So page 13, the first thing we're going to do, preparing for an offer, obtain the buyer's pre-approval letter. Absolutely. I would never even dream of writing an offer without a pre-approval letter. Number 2, market analysis. Why would you run back to the office and do a market analysis real quick?
So you know that it will get approved or that the pricing's right?
Yeah, that the pricing is right. Like, yeah, I can support this price. It's not way over the top. And that's really important to say because if you end up having to roll in closing costs and let's say the house is $200,000 and they actually need about $5,000 closing costs for the seller to pay. But if that house has been on the market, that seller is looking to net $200,000. So you're going to offer $205,000 and you want to take a look and go, with a degree of confidence, do I think that house is going to appraise for $205,000? And by knowing that, you just get on your search on the MLS and you draw a parameter around that neighborhood and you see what is sold in the last 6 months. Okay. Gives you a really good ballpark idea. Okay. So review the tax records. So when you see the seller's disclosures, there's a line item on there that says, are there any special assessments pending? And it should say yes or no. But when you look at their tax records, look at the tax section, like get on Olmsted County, look at the taxes and see if there are any special assessments pending because sometimes agents miss that. And what you don't want, especially if you're representing a seller, is to get to the closing table and they have written the contract that the seller is going to pay for all special assessments prior to closing. You do not want a $3,000 surprise for your seller at the closing table. Okay, that'd be bad. So always double check special assessments on the county records. Ensure the property is still available. Well, obviously, because you've called the agent and you've been there. Of course, it's available. When speaking with the listing agent, build rapport, gather as much information about the seller and the property as you can. So we've kind of talked about that a little bit. When are you presenting offers? What's the best close date? What if we want the hot tub? Is the seller willing to negotiate the hot tub? Things like that, okay? Next one, ask the question of the listing agent to discover what's important to the seller. Again, that's saying we want to write a strong offer. We've got some flexibility. Let me know what works best for you guys. And I always say too, when you're doing this, you guys, like call the listing agent and say, hey, I'd love to make this work with you. Let me know what we can do. Thanks for letting us see your house. Buyers is really excited about it. So start building rapport with that other agent, okay? Inquire about the activity on the property, and that's where it is, hey, do you have any other offers? Obtain a seller's disclosure, and that should be on the MLS. Find out if there have been any other offers. Now, this is an interesting one because obviously if a house has been on the market for just a little bit, a couple days maybe, you want to see if there's any other offers coming in. So what happens if you have a property that's been on the market for a fair amount of time and your buyer wants to make a lowball offer? What's a question you could ask the other agent to see if they've had any lowball offers that have not been accepted? I basically just gave you the answer. Hey, have you had any offers? Because you can't say, hey, would your seller, like let's say it's a $400,000 property. Hey, would your seller accept $350,000? Okay, you probably wouldn't ask it that way. You'd probably say, just curious, have there been any offers that your seller has rejected because they've been too low? And that agent might say yes or no. Okay, that's one way to go. Okay, where emotionally are the sellers? Are they open to a low offer? Okay, all right. Flip the page. Writing the offer. Okay. We're going to take a look at this. I do want to talk about one thing. If you go down to the 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet point there about the cover letter. So I like to think of a cover letter as when I shoot that agent over the offer that I am, hi, Megan, loved your property. Here's the offer. Here are the terms. Let me know if we can improve the offer in any way. Can't wait to hear back from you. Okay, that's a cover letter. Sometimes people will say if you're representing a buyer and you know it's going to be a multiple offer situation, maybe include a letter from that buyer, right? If the seller is accepting those letters, has a picture and it's written by the buyer, hey, we're the Jones family. We love your home. We've got little children and the yard is perfect, blah, 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 blah. Okay, when you represent a buyer, that sometimes is the piece that puts your offer on the top if there's multiples. It's the emotional side of a transaction, okay? Let's flip that around. If I'm representing a seller, I always say I'm not accepting, I call them lovey letters, okay? I'm not accepting lovey letters because what if I get 3 lovey letters and the families are all different nationalities and their picture is on there and they've got beautiful families, but I accept offer number 3. Who's to say offer number 1? Those people aren't going to come and go, you chose the other offer because they're a different nationality than I am. Now your seller is in a world of hurt, right? Now they've opened the door for somebody to come and pull the fair housing flag and say, I am challenging your motive, which like seriously, 99.9% of the time, that's probably not why they chose family number 3, but you don't know that. I mean, you don't know what the other people are how they're going to interpret that. So when I represent the buyer, if I feel like a lovey letter is going to help and the seller will accept them, I'll write a lovey letter. If I'm representing the seller, I always say we're not accepting lovey letters, assuming that my seller is okay with that. Remember, every decision is theirs, right? But I would advise them not to accept lovey letters. And I put it in the agent remarks, okay?
Would you ever advise that they accept the letters without pictures?
Nope, I wouldn't, because we know what you can say with fair housing and not fair housing. A buyer doesn't know that they can talk about who knows what, anything with fair housing that might come up. I would just say, I would advise them against accepting those levy letters,
Got it. Thank you.
okay?
Can I chime in on that?
And
Carrie?
that's not legal advice. That's just the practical side of what could happen. So if you have any questions about that, Michelle Smith is our legal advisor. You can certainly call her, but she has also been the one, as we sit in different meetings, has said that that's a potential issue. Yeah, Megan?
Well, I was just gonna say, like you said, we have to follow fair housing. And while the buyers don't know what that is, they also don't have to follow it.
Yeah,
So there are times when you think if your buyer writes a letter that will pull at someone's heartstrings when they say, I'm a single mom. You know, like I had somebody write one because she was a single mom in a disabled vet.
mhm,
And I knew that that was gonna call out to the sellers.
yeah,
Because I think he was also military or something like that. Now, I can't say those things, but the buyer can say whatever they want. They are not held to fair housing. So,
yeah,
that's, part of the reason for them. But we've seen a lot of those just go away. And I think Michelle even said in one of our meetings that I don't know that anyone has won in court, but there have been a lot of settlements.
mm,
So that's just kind of good to know. Like you said, I ask my sellers, do you want to see letters? And a lot of times they'll tell me right away, like, we don't want to see any letters or anything like that. So.
Yeah, no, that
Well,
makes
and
a
I
lot of
think
sense. Thanks for the example.
yeah, they don't always know how to think through it, right? They don't always know that by accepting letters, you're potentially opening yourself up to somebody who, is angry at the world, and now you're part of that, right? So again, I've represented buyers where I've had them write the letters, just like you said. But I think that time Michelle came out and talked to us, it really opened my eyes to, all right, if one of my jobs is to educate and advise, then I feel like it's my obligation to tell them potentially this is what could happen. And most times the sellers are really appreciative of like, oh yeah, I don't want to be in that situation, right? Let's just stick to the numbers, take the emotion out of it. So at the end of the day, it's their decision. But I think it's your obligation to say, here's the two ways you can look at this. Okay, what do you want to do with it? Okay, so that let's go back to bullet point number 1. Ensure the buyer knows that all checks, earnest money are written at the same time the offer is written and are deposited upon acceptance. Okay, those are just basics. You're telling them how it works. We're pulling up the correct forms. Number 3, bring your laptop or tablet with you. Whatever. Figure out where a good place is to go back. Sometimes you go back to your house and write the offer and you e-sign everything. Talk about that cover letter, creating that buyer loop in Command. I think it would be an opportunity now. The loop thing is kind of gone. And then we're going to email messaging. Use the email messaging feature in my transactions to submit the cover letter along with the offer. Okay, so that's whatever, easy. Go to the next page, 15. We've got to talk about price and terms. Okay, when we're writing that offer, we need to include the seller's disclosure. We need to talk about conveyances. Here's one thing I'm going to tell you, and this, I'll speak out of a failure of mine. I wrote an offer one time where it said the washer and dryer were included. We get to the final walkthrough and there's no washer and dryer, okay? And I was new and I call Zach and I'm like, what do I do? Am I going to be buying a washer and dryer for these people now? And so it was listed in the listing, but I did not put it in the purchase agreement under property includes, right? So Zach was like, okay, your purchase agreement rules the day. So if you didn't put it in there, you can go back and ask the seller, hey, where's the washer and dryer? You said it was included. And that's what I did. And the listing agent said, well, you never said you wanted it. So they ended up selling it or doing something with it. The buyers ended up being okay because they had another washer and dryer, but it was that, oh my goodness. So make sure when you look on the listing, there's the part where it talks about appliances. washer, dryer, blah, 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 blah. I just cut and paste that and put it right in property includes. And then you want to add as seen on, and then whatever day that you are showing the property. Okay. Because you don't want to put fridge, stove, all those things. And then you come to the walkthrough and you're like, wow, they swapped out their really nice fridge and stove for this junker over here, right? So that would be totally wrong, but it's happened before. So I would add as seen on the day of your showing. Okay. Any questions about that? All right. Earnest money. So typically 1% would be a reasonable earnest money amount to put down. So on a $200,000 house, $2,000. Well, what if your buyer only has 1,000? I think you could do 1,000 as well. What if they want to write a really strong offer and put 5,000? You can do that as well. That's one of those places where you've got a little bit of room to make your offer look really good. But you also have to recognize that if your offer gets accepted, that's money that's coming out of their account within 5 days. Okay. So they have to have that cash on hand. And if they don't, you might want to call the agent and say, the listing agent, and say, here's the situation, highly qualified. They're just asking if they can put down a little bit less earnest money because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, so if it feels a little bit low, you just might want to have a conversation with the listing agent about that. But typically 1% is what we're looking at for earnest money. I will also say kind of probably about, I would say, Megan, you might want to agree, 70% of transactions are now using trust funds, and that's the electronic version of an earnest money check. So we're not running checks around to brokerages. So just know that that's a really easy way to deal with earnest money. Ask an agent how to do that if it's your first time. Financing terms. Okay, we're going to have to make sure that the financing, like let's say you've got an FHA loan for your buyers and you're looking at a house that has a whole bunch of peeling paint. They're not going to pass for an FHA loan, right? So you got to make sure you know the type of loan that your buyer has and that you educate them about the type of home they can buy with that type of a loan. Now, if you have conventional, you can buy pretty much anything, but it's the FHA and the VA that you have to be a little bit more careful. The appraiser is going to go through and call out a whole lot more items than they would with a conventional loan. Okay. Question for you. What if I write an offer and I've got a Wells Fargo pre-approval? Can I switch my lender midway through a transaction? Any questions or any comments?
I mean, I would think so, but I guess I'm obviously new to this, so I could be wrong.
Yeah, no. Good. We're going to think through this together. So let's say you've got a 40, let's say we have a 40-day close. Most times when you set your close date, it's between 30 and 45 days. You're going to call the lender and say, how much time do you need to close this deal, right? Because that's a lender question. How quickly can you get it done? You don't want to say 30 days and then the lender's like, there is no way. We are so backed up. We're never going to get it done in 30 days. And now you've just created a mess of expectation for your buyer and the seller. Okay. So you're going to call them and let's say you've got a 45-day close and if you're not totally sure that you're going to actually go with Wells Fargo, I usually say you have 2 days to figure out who you're going with and you lock that in. And then I typically would call the other agent back and say, hey, just FYI, we've decided to go with Bell Mortgage instead of Wells Fargo. Here's the pre-approval. Okay, good. Now everyone still has lots of time. You can't be on day 15 and switch lenders and expect it to time. Okay, so just kind of a little thought on that. Does that make sense, Lisa?
Yeah, so you can change lenders, but if you do at that point, you're likely going to be pushing closing dates out and could that then jeopardize the deal in its entirety?
It could. But if you're pre-approved for Wells Fargo, you got to hold that deal together. So you don't want them to be, you don't want them to be wishy-washy. So don't walk into it going, oh, and you can switch lenders anytime you want. Do not.
Sure.
Okay. So when you walk in with that pre-approval, you're like, okay, you're assuming that's who they're going with. Okay. And if anything feels a little sideways, like, okay, what if they come in with a Quicken Loan pre-approval, right? And you're like, look, they've run the numbers. Okay, let's write the offer with that pre-approval. And we're going to write in there that buyer will have a local lender secured by, and then give it a couple days. Okay, so there are times where you can do that, but generally speaking, you do not want your buyers to think they can just be jumping all over the place once that transaction is happening. Okay?
Right.
Okay. Buyer pre-approval letter, obviously we've got that, and loan approval. So that is, sometimes you can write in an offer that you're going to have the lender give a written statement to the sellers by a certain date saying, yep, I know it's a week before closing, but we've got everything buttoned up and this buyer is good to go. So that, again, if a seller asks for one of those letters, you need to call your lender and say, can you have a written statement by XYZ date that they're asking for, okay? Flip to page 16, closing date. Again, make sure your closing date works for the lender, number one. And then you're coordinating all the dominoes. Sometimes there are multiple sales that are being lined up, right? So just work with everybody on that. I always say I don't like to close on a Monday or a Friday. You've got no wiggle room, right? If something goes sideways or you need an extra day for something, if you close on a Monday, essentially that loan has to be wrapped up by the Wednesday before Monday. Okay. And always keep in mind too that you've got holidays. Thanksgiving coming up on a Thursday. Okay, that's a weird time. So if you have closings coming up, make sure you try and close before then or fully into the next week. You wouldn't want to close the Friday after Thanksgiving because that potentially could be difficult. So you have to think about those things. So close on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday if possible. Home warranties. Typically, you'll ask for a home warranty if the home is older with older mechanicals, older appliances, okay? New construction, typically not. And typically you're gonna ask for that home warranty after the inspection. Not always, but that I would say typically that's when you wanna deal with that. Repair limits, again, that would be something you would tackle during the inspection period. Special clauses or contingencies. Do you have a house to sell? Is your house that you have to sell, does it have an offer? Now we're just waiting for it to close. All those kind of things. Kind of some of the uniquenesses of deals can get negotiated when you're writing the offer as well. Okay. All right. Our offer process. I can't get this in. Let me get this screen out of the way. So we're going to make the offer. The seller is going to either counter, accept, or reject. We talked about that one already. We talked about preparing to write the offer and actually writing the offer. And then we're going to present that offer to the other agent. Now, I want to show you. Let me see. Oops. Sorry about that. I'm looking for my purchase agreement. I want to go through that with you guys real quick. Oh, here we go. All right. Can you see the purchase agreement on this page?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to talk about the nuts and bolts of actually writing this purchase agreement. Okay. So because I don't have you on my screen, tell me if you have never written a purchase agreement. Anyone never written a purchase agreement?
I've practiced them, but not like, officially written one.
Okay, Melanie, have you, was that you, Mel?
Oh, that was Lisa.
Oh, Melanie, have you written a purchase agreement?
I have. I actually just had my first closing a few days ago.
Oh, yay. Tyler, have you written a purchase agreement?
I wrote my first one this week.
Oh, good. Okay, so we're going to kind of zing through this then, okay? So obviously, we're going to go and refer to these line items on the left-hand side. Okay, hang on. I just need to grab a drink here. I'm like, all right. So we're sitting down writing a purchase agreement. So I've already talked to my sellers about the things we have to decide. How much you're putting down, when's the close date, do you want an inspection, do you need closing costs, etc. So we're going to fill in the names of the buyer, how much earnest money they're going to put down. And when you say it shall be delivered to the listing broker, that's normal. Okay, that's the default, if you will. Or if checked to, now you would use this box. Let's say your buyer found a for sale by owner. I'm not going to be giving the for sale by owner my $2,000 check. I'm going to say this needs to be held in a special account. We'll hold it at the brokerage. Or another place you could hold an earnest money check is the title company. Okay, so if it's anything other than the listing broker, now a for sale by owner does not have a listing broker, so then you would have to specify where that earnest money is being held. Okay, make sense? So 11, 12, 13, 14, these are all the legal descriptions. There's a way in Transaction Desk to tap into the county records or a listing, and it will auto-populate all of this stuff. And everyone said, glory be. So this right here is where you add anything in addition, right? So like you say, the washer and the dryer would go here. Washer and dryer as seen on 10/11/2020. Okay, you'll notice up on line 20, if these are built in, dishwashers, refrigerators, wine and beverage refrigerators, trash compactors, ovens. So these are all in here already. But again, washer dryer isn't in there. And so I just take whatever's written in the appliance line and I copy and paste it here. So it's very, very clear for everybody. If there's anything excluded, okay, let's say, let's say there's this old shed in the backyard that the buyer would like the seller to take care of. Shed in backyard, okay? Asking the seller to take care of and remove that shed prior to closing. Purchase price. All right. Let's say this. We need to add, the purchase price is $200,000. But we know we're gonna have to roll in some closing costs. So we're gonna offer $205,000. It's a conventional loan, 3% down. And then what would be the mortgage financing if it's 3% down? What do I put on line 42?
97%.
97. So whatever happens here needs to add up to 100, right? So, and the close date, let's say, okay, we're here, we're going to do a close at the end of November. If I say November 26th, is that problematic?
Potentially.
Yes, that's Thanksgiving. So do I want to close on a Friday after Thanksgiving?
No.
No, I don't want to close on a Saturday or Sunday, and I don't want to close on a Monday. So this is where you go, okay, you call the lender and you say, either we have to close the 25th or we have to close the 1st, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So let's say what works best for everybody is the 1st good? Yep, okay, we're going to close the 1st. Okay, this purchase agreement is subject to mortgage financing, okay? It's a first mortgage. That doesn't mean the first mortgage they've ever had in their life. It means in terms of priority, this one gets paid first. Financing, we're going to go does not include a grant program. Let's say it was a Minnesota housing loan. Then you would put does and you would write Minnesota housing over here, okay? But that's not the case here. So this is a does not include a grant program. We know it's a conventional loan, okay? So there's a few different ways to fill things out down here. Usually they're 30-year loans, not more than, a lot of times you would write market rate. Some people require a number in there. So let's say that I am representing a buyer where I know that that interest rate needs to be at 3%, or they're not going to be able to afford the loan. Okay, so I might have to say 3% on this one. Okay. Typically, I think I've only had one time where I've had to specify that it couldn't go over 5, and it obviously wasn't going to go over 5 because interest rates were crazy low at that point. So just know that you, Megan, I know you were in the lending world. Do you sometimes put market rate there, or do you put a number?
I do sometimes put market rate. I usually put a number.
Okay.
For the simple reason that if market rates have a huge flux and we never know beforehand when that could happen, that could actually kick out a lot of buyers where they technically might still qualify, but now their payment is where they don't want it to be.
Yeah.
So if they're approved, let's say that they're approved and the lender said the interest rate is 3.25%. Then a lot of times I will write in there 3.75%, because rates typically aren't going to change that much. But
Right.
but in case they do before they get locked, I usually put a number in, and I usually just put it over at whatever they're approved at.
Yeah. Okay, so there's different ways to skin that cat, you guys. So then we get down to that mortgage financing contingency. You typically would check box 72 or 78. Okay, box 72 is the easiest for and the most straightforward for your buyer. Basically, it says if the buyer cannot secure the financing, earnest money gets refunded to the buyer. Okay, so you never want to put forfeited to the seller. Okay, that'd be bad. You're representing the buyer here. 78. This is the other option. This is where we are talking about that written statement from the lender. You can also say buyer shall provide the seller with a written statement on or before, and before you put a date in here, this is a lender question. So you need to call the lender and say, hey, if we provide a written statement, how soon can you tell us that this loan is absolutely going through? Because basically by providing that written statement, it says here on line 93, if this purchase agreement does not close on the stated close date for any reason related to financing, basically then the seller keeps the earnest money. Okay, do you see how there's a difference? Line 72 says if the financing, if the wheels fall off the bus of financing, you get your earnest money back, buyer. If you check line 78, now essentially your lender is guaranteeing that mortgage, and the buyer risks losing earnest money. Okay? Read that whole section for the nitty gritty of it, but that's the gist of it. 114 and on. When do you have to lock in your interest rate? So if the numbers are really tight, you're going to want to do within 5 days. I have honestly never checked that box. I always do anytime prior to closing or as required by the lender. Okay. Your lender knows if your numbers are tight, they need to get that interest rate locked in. Lender commitment work orders. So let's say you're buying a house that's FHA loan, and you're looking around going, boy, there might be a few things called out. And here you're saying, okay, the seller is going to agree to do some of those repairs if it gets called out, but you have a conventional loan. So this is, and the house is newer. There's not going to be anything called out. So typically then I would put 0 here. We're not asking the seller to put any money toward anything that the bank is going to call out on this house. And that's a case by case basis, you guys. You have to know what kind of loan you have, and you have to know the condition of the house. It's hard to do that when you're a new agent. Ask somebody before you jump into that. Okay. Line 1.
Carrie,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, please.
Would it be, is it beneficial to even just put like $100 on there just in case something would come up, just so you have a little bit of coverage rather than to put 0? Or
And again, that comes with experience, right?
Okay.
And if you're in multiple offers, the more things that you're not asking the seller to be on the hook for, the better. Okay. But
okay.
again, you'll know walking through kind of the things that get called out. And like I say, ask another agent. And most agents can look at the pictures online and go, yeah, this one looks like it'll be fine. Or, but yeah, especially if it's an FHA, then I would probably put $100 there. Yeah. Okay, line 127. So what would happen is, and this can confuse some people, agrees to pay any reinspection fee. So basically the appraiser comes out and then he's like, oh, wait a minute, you have to do X and Y before your loan is approved by the bank as far as the appraisal side. So then you go back and you're like, right, seller, X and Y. Once you've done that, the appraiser has to come back out and just make sure you've done those items, right? Typically, the buyer is going to pay that reinspection fee. So it's not a whole second appraisal. It's probably less than $100 for him to come out and just say he drove to the property. Yes, you fixed X and Y. Good. Okay. So, but typically the buyer pays that. FHA escape clause does not apply because we have a conventional loan. So you're going to scroll all the way down to line 158. If you have an FHA or a VA loan, then we'll go back and fill in the other ones, but I'm going to just go based on a conventional loan. Now, seller's contributions to buyer's costs. Seller is, remember, the seller's going to need some closing costs because they're a first-time home buyer. They've saved enough for a down payment, but they don't necessarily have the money for these closing costs. So how much did we say that they were going to ask the seller to pay? Do you remember?
5,000.
Yep. Because the asking price was 200,000, but we're going to ask over and then ask the seller to roll in those closing costs. So at the end of the day, the seller is essentially getting a $200,000 offer. Okay. So 169, are we going to have an inspection? I always recommend an inspection, always. And if a buyer says, you know what, I don't want an inspection, then I get them to sign a piece of paper saying they have declined an inspection. Okay, so buyer elects to have an inspection. This purchase agreement is contingent upon inspections. Line 179, the seller does not agree to allow buyer to perform intrusive testing. So we're not going to be knocking holes in walls to see what's back there. Okay, if there is something that has to be done intrusively, we ask the seller to give us permission to do that. Okay. Line 158. This is really, really, really important. You have to say, how long are we going to take to have all these inspections done? Now, you can't always get an inspector right away, right? You don't want to put 14 days because essentially that house isn't sold until the inspection is done. So if I'm a seller, I'm like, can you not get it done any sooner than 14 days? So I would usually put, if I know I can get it done in 7, I'll get it done in 7, okay? So what that means, it means within 7 calendar days of final acceptance, all inspections, tests, and resulting negotiations, if any, shall be done. So let's say we get our purchase agreement signed by all parties today. Now we have a 7-day inspection contingency period that starts tomorrow. So one of the things you have to know is that all of the testing and all of the negotiation has to get wrapped up by day 7 at midnight. All right. If you feel like, boy, we are not coming to terms, we need a couple more days, then you get an amendment out and you say inspection contingency days shall be extended to, and then add a couple more days. Okay. So you need to be careful. If, let's say you get to day 7 and you haven't come to terms, you haven't canceled, and you haven't written an amendment extending those days, if you get to midnight on day 7, your buyer has just bought the property as is. Okay. So the responsibility lies on the buyer side to make sure you get that done in the 7 days. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Okay. Sale of buyer's property. Here's another possible contingency. Number 1 says, this is a contingent offer. I've got to get my house on the market in order to buy this one. Okay. Or Number 2 says this purchase agreement is contingent upon the successful closing of the property. So I've had my house on the market, I have an offer, now I'm going out to make an offer on something I want to buy. Or number 3, we're going to check box 3. The buyer has the financial ability to perform on this purchase agreement without the sale and closing of another property. Okay, they've been renting, let's say, and so they can get out of their lease at any point. Okay, then we get to the real estate taxes and special assessments. Notice I'm clicking prorating. Everything gets prorated. Seller pays up to the day of closing, buyer pays from closing on, okay, for those real estate taxes. And then seller always pays the difference between homestead and non-homestead. It's kind of doesn't happen super often, but we ask the seller to take care of all of these. Next page, seller shall pay, seller shall pay, seller shall pay, and seller shall pay. If there's any deferred taxes or special assessments that are coming down the pipe, the seller shall pay prior to closing. They take care of all that stuff. Line 241, as of the date of this purchase agreement, the seller represents that they have not received any notice. You know that because that's a question in the seller's disclosure, and you can also double check the tax records for that, okay? Line 252, any previously written purchase agreement. Let's say I looked at Megan's house and I loved it, and I wrote a purchase agreement, and then I looked at Lisa's house and I loved it even more, so I want to cancel with Megan and go with Lisa's house. Well, here's where you have to tell Lisa that, yeah, I got to go cancel a purchase agreement. But we're going to just go with, because we've been renting, we have not ever written a purchase agreement before. The purchase agreement is not subject to any cancellation, okay? I always want to check line 259, warranty deed. It's a deed that you get from the title company. They do a search of the property, making sure there's no clouds on title, okay? There's a few scenarios where you might have to ask for a different type of a deed, or a different type of a deed might be offered, but 99% of the time, we need a warranty deed. Possession, immediately after closing. So I always tell my buyers, so even if it's a vacant property, you cannot start moving your stuff in until we've signed the closing papers and I give you the keys at that point, okay? Sometimes there are exceptions to that, but I would not give them the expectation that, oh yeah, that's a point in negotiation. You'll know as their agent, if something comes up, let's say you know there's going to be a massive snowstorm on the day they're supposed to close, I might call them and say, hey, your place is vacant. Are you guys okay if we get a few things moved into the garage because there's a snowstorm coming, or something like that, okay? And then we all sign some documentation giving each other permission. But typically, you don't get to go into the property until after it's closed.
Beverages need to be finished. I got most of Mr. Pepper.
Was that a question, or was that I forgot to mute? Are we good? Okay, we're gonna scroll down. Hey, Lisa. You guys want?
Talking to you.
You're talking to me? Okay.
No, you can hear me because my phone's not muted. Sorry.
You're good. Did you have a question? Okay, we're going to plow along. Line 361, buyer has received the seller's property disclosure. Okay. Let's say that the place you're buying has a disclosure alternative. Okay, this is like something I learned early on. Typically, a disclosure alternative is something where the seller has not actually lived in the house. They might have been a landlord. They might have bought it to flip. They can sign a disclosure alternative. I am waiving my right, my obligation to disclose anything, which means if this is the case when you have a buyer, this is what you're going to say. You are assuming a greater risk in purchasing this place because they don't have to disclose anything, and you're saying, I'm okay with that. You can still have an inspection and find out what you can, but know that a disclosure alternative means they're waiving their obligation to disclose any material fact. They might know that the house is going to fall down tomorrow. They don't have to disclose it. Okay. So you're representing a buyer. You say you are assuming a greater risk in accepting a disclosure alternative. Sometimes I've gone back to the agent and said, we're interested, but we'd like your seller to write out a real seller's disclosure. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. Okay. But for today, we're going to go with just the 99% and say that, yes, we have an opportunity to see the seller's disclosure. All right. Line 371 and on, it's city water, city sewer. Is there a sewage treatment system? Seller does not know. Private well, I would say this, typically if you're living in town, does not know of a well. There are some parts in the older parts of Rochester, you guys, where there's an old well on the property. So then you have to disclose that, okay? This purchase agreement is not subject to this inspection contingency for the well and the septic, okay? Because we're buying a place in town. There's no subsurface sewage treatment system. All right, home protection warranty. Again, typically we're gonna put no home protection warranty. I like to deal with that after the inspection, okay? If the inspector comes back and goes, okay, your furnace is 42 years old, it's going to die anytime soon, but it's still working now, so we can't ask them to replace the furnace, but we might want to ask for a home protection warranty, okay? It's about I would say $500 ask for the seller. We're asking them to provide a warranty, that if something breaks down on the house, you pay a small deductible and a company comes out and takes care of it. But typically, like I say, I don't deal with that until after the inspection. This box down here, agency notice, we say who is representing the seller, who's representing the buyer, okay? We say who these people are. If Megan and I are doing a deal together, it's dual agency, okay? So, but let's just assume it's not dual agency for right now. Then we go to this, and newer agents typically get this kind of all mixed up. If dual agency does not apply, do not complete lines 406 to 422. You don't have to sign anything down here if it's not dual agency, okay? I often see people filling this in or having their buyers sign it. I'm like, nope, you don't have to sign anything if it's not dual agency. Okay, we're gonna scroll down to the bottom. If there's anything else you have to add to your purchase agreement, or like let's do the lead-based paint. Okay, let's say you're buying a house that was built before 1978, and so we're gonna make sure that that lead-based paint addendum is attached. Okay, so we get down to the last page. You're not going to check box 491. This is checked only if there's a counter offer. Okay. So that gets left blank because we're writing an offer to the seller saying, okay, hopefully they're going to accept it as written and we won't have to write a counter offer. Okay. So that box doesn't get checked yet. Line 495 and 6, FERPTA. This is a tax question. If the seller is a legal resident of the United States or not. This is also in the seller's disclosure. So we know that our seller is not a foreign person. And I'm going to tell you guys, like there are times I've sat down with a seller and he was Caucasian and she was Spanish or Mexican. And I asked this question and they looked at me and I said, this is not an immigration question. This is a tax question. So sometimes you have to understand what you're walking into and preface some of these questions when you're asking them, okay? Then everybody signs final acceptance date. You do not fill in final acceptance date until all parties have signed, okay? Because it might take a few days for you to come to agreement on some terms. Once you've come to agreement, this final acceptance date gets written in. Let's say it's, boy, this one took a while to get going, to get agreed upon, or at the end of the month. Now we know that once you have final acceptance, our inspection contingency days start the next day. Okay, that's why this date is super, super important. Okay, this talks about I've had the opportunity to review the disclosure statement arbitration. You get your buyers to sign this. Okay. And then you show them the arbitration form. This is a new form that we've added to the purchase agreement, wire fraud alert. It says, be careful when wiring funds. Oftentimes buyers will wire their funds to the title company, or you can bring a certified check. You can't write a personal check. So be careful when you're wiring funds. Make sure you're getting the wiring instructions directly from the title company, okay? That is the gist of writing a purchase agreement. Does anybody have any questions about that? It's pretty straightforward, but I would say if you've never written a purchase agreement before sending it off to the listing agent, just say, call me up and say, Carrie, can you just real quick review this for me? Make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Because I've received purchase agreements from new agents that have been a complete mess. And you have to send them back and go try again, right? You don't want to be that. There's enough of us that are willing to take a quick peek at what you've done before you send it off, okay? And also in command, there's the checklist. Make sure I've got everything that I need before sending this off, okay? Any questions on that? Do we need a quick break? Because then we just have to talk about representing the seller and receiving an offer. So how about that? Let's take like 2 minutes, go grab a drink, do what you need to do. Let's be back at 10:20. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'm gonna log off, Carrie.
Okay, thanks, Megan.
Let me sit in.
Yeah, see ya. All right, if anyone has any questions, let me know while we're waiting till 10:20. All right, let's jump back on here. Okay, everybody here?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So representing the seller, so page 19, receive the offer, gather the information about the buyer. Let's take a peek at that because that's interesting. It's number 2 down here. So there are some things here that I'm like, okay, it's a little bit overkill. So how long has the buyer been looking? I don't care. I just want to know what the terms of the offer are, right? So have they been pre-approved by a lender? Obviously, you're going to have that information because of their pre-approval letter. Do they have anything to sell? Is that going to be part of the purchase agreement? Absolutely. I'm going to know that by looking at the purchase agreement. Sometimes you'll have a house that has to be sold, right, by your buyer. And then it's often helpful to send the listing agent that house to go, okay, here's the house. Here's the price that we're going to go in at. So then if you're representing the seller, you can say, okay, they have a house to sell, but it's in the $220,000 price range. It's going to fly off the shelf. Okay. Versus if the buyer's agent says, yep, they have a house to sell, they'd like to go in at like 240, and you're like, ooh, that's a little overpriced. That might take a while to sell. That will all play into how you advise your seller on a contingent offer. The next one says, if they're from out of town, why are they moving to this area? Again, I don't really care. Why did they select this particular property? Again, I'm looking at the terms of the agreement, right? What are they willing to offer? How'd they come up with their offer price? If it's the low ball, I might ask that. Tell me how they came up with their price. Have they made any offers on any other properties? If so, what happened on those negotiations? I think that question is looking to say, hey, are they easy to work with or not? But I don't ever ask that, okay? I want to do the second one, are they pre-approved? And the third one, do they have anything to sell? Any questions about that? If not, flip over to page 20. So you're going to want to review that offer and make sure that everything is filled out appropriately. The address, the price, check to see whether the offer falls in the range of the seller's expectations. Earnest money, take a look at the earnest money. Is it sufficient for your seller? Time for acceptance, check to see how long your seller has to respond. So typically in some markets, they'll say, seller shall respond by 9 p.m. tonight or the offer is removed. Okay, you really don't see that in this market, okay? So I wouldn't put that unless there's an absolute reason to put that. I've literally never put that in any offers. Pre-approval, verify they're pre-approved, loan approval. Again, if you, let's say the close date is like 60 days out, I might ask for a written statement from that lender in about 30 days, just to make sure that we're good to go, okay? Don't have to wait that long. Financing terms, make sure the financing terms are agreeable. Close date, make sure the close date will work for everybody. Is there a home warranty? Conveyances, double check. I just had one where the guy was gonna take his microwave. It was one that sat on the counter. And I noticed in the purchase agreement, they asked for the microwave. And so we had to talk about that. Are you okay to leave the microwave for them? You're going to buy another one. Yep, that was fine because they offered over asking price. So just double check that, okay? In this case, the seller was going to take his washer and dryer as well, and they did not put it in the purchase agreement. So we were good there. So double check some of those things. Any kind of repairs? Did they list anything in the offer? Are there any special clauses or contingencies? If you're doing a common interest community, there's HOA things that you're going to have to ask for, common interest community things. So that's kind of a whole different animal. So talk to one of us if you need to do that. Do you have the seller's disclosures? Possession date. These are all things that you're reviewing the offer, just like we did when we wrote the offer, right? So then you're going to go and present your offer. Now, I don't think there's a script for this. I typically go, if I know an offer is coming in, I mean, you've got a seller sitting at home on pins and needles, right? So I'd say, hey, I've got an offer in hand. Let's pick a time to review. Oh, I've got another offer just came in. So like, if you look on page 22, there's a script for presenting an offer to your seller. Good morning, it's Carrie Brand with Keller Williams Realty. We have an offer. Well, I sure hope they've got your name in their contact so they know it's you calling. And you've been communicating via text or whatever the whole time. So it's usually not that formal. So, but what your seller wants you to do is walk through the offer with them. They may know right away this is a good offer, or they may go, okay, what does that mean if it's an FHA loan versus a conventional loan? Okay, so you need to walk through that with them. When you present your offer to the clients, you can say, look, there's 3 ways to go about this. You can accept the offer as written, or we could counter, meaning changing some of the terms, or you can flat out say, I'm not working with this person. That lowball offer makes them unreasonable. I don't want to work with them. Okay, so you just have to let them know those are the three things that they can do. So if you look on page 22, there is that piece of what happens when your seller wants to write a lowball offer. Okay, what do you do then? And sometimes as an agent, you might go, I have told them this isn't going to fly. And you're a little bit embarrassed to send the offer over, right? But your fiduciary duties are not to make yourself look like the other agents. Your fiduciary duty is to your buyer. So you send off the offer. Now, if I'm the seller, you've got to buy or representing the seller. Your seller is like, oh, we're going to get a great offer. And then what if the first one you get isn't great, right? What if it's a junker offer, low ball, house to sell, all kinds of crazy things. So you need to, again, manage the emotions, right? Because you don't want your seller to go, oh, that's a crappy offer. And I'm all, get all mad. And that's the emotional side, right? Where you say, okay, we have an offer. It's not a great offer, but let's see if we can work with it and get it to a place where everybody's happy. Okay. And to say, okay, let's review it. There are sometimes where we go back and say, nope, I'm going to dig my heels in. I want what I want. I'm not willing to lowball, or I'm not willing to pay their closing costs. And sometimes you say, we may not come to agreement. We may have to let this offer go. But let's see if they're willing to do the dance. Remember, it's a dance, not a fight. Okay. So try and take the emotion out of it. Okay. And focus on the terms. Do you have any questions about that? And the more you're in real estate, the more you realize you are really managing emotions. Okay. At the end of the day, the decisions are the sellers, right? So you come to them with this offer, it's a low ball. And you could say, like, I might go, okay, look, here's what I know about this buyer. They're recently divorced. They blah, blah, like, here's a story. I might be able to tell my seller, let them know a little bit more about why did they write a low ball offer. I don't always know those details. Sometimes I just need to say, look, what do you guys want to do? Where are you happy coming out in this deal financially? They might go, you know what, it's been on the market 2 days. We really want our asking price. I said, that's reasonable. So let's counter offer that. If there's a lot of terms that need to be countered, you guys, I would call the agent that wrote the offer before writing up a whole big counter offer and say, this is where we've landed. Seller really is going to counter at asking price. Would your buyer be open to that? Because what you don't want to do is negotiate these things in a vacuum, right? It's so much easier to get on the phone and talk to the agent. Let's kind of verbally agree upon some terms and then put it in a counter offer. Otherwise, you have a lot of signatures flying back and forth and a lot of amendments flying back and forth unnecessarily. So get on the phone. Let's negotiate these things. If you can come to an agreement, let's do that. If not, then you wait for the next offer. Okay. So when is the time that you can, when you can expect a lowball offer? Or if you're representing a buyer, what are times when you could write a lowball offer? What are your thoughts on that?
When it's been on the market for a long time.
Yep, high days on market. When's another time you could probably write a lowball offer?
When the comparables are showing a lower price than
Yeah.
what the listing is.
Yep. And you can communicate that to the agent as you present the offer, saying based on the comparables, we feel like this is a fair market price, a fair market offer. I'll tell you, the other time you can write a lowball offer, if it's November 15th and we're expecting a crazy snowstorm where you're like, all right, this one's not going to melt, this one's going to be with us. and somebody does not want to sit on their house over the winter, and somebody does not want to be shoveling their driveway and their sidewalks, that's another time that you can go, all right, where's the motivation? And just because a seller has rejected a lowball offer in the past doesn't mean that their motivation hasn't changed, and they might be willing to take a look at a lower ball offer now. Okay? So things to keep in mind when you're selling in Minnesota. Okay. Do you guys have any questions? Have you run into anything that you want to go, hey, let's talk about this or that? Anything? Okay. This is just a little bit different doing this on Zoom. Typically, I would break into groups and we would have one person be the selling agent presenting to the buyer's agent, et cetera, and we'd go back and forth. But obviously that can't happen. So I think it's really important that we went through writing up a purchase agreement. If you've got any kind of oddball things going on, non-conventional, we've got some, I don't know, crazy circumstances surrounding things, then you make sure you talk to an agent who's done it before you write it up. Because, you know, even if you've done a lot of deals, there are still things that come up where I find an agent and go, how do you deal with this? Like, what's the best path through this? And you want to anticipate everything if you can. Let me give you an example. So I have a buyer right now. She is a childcare provider for a bunch of the nurses at Mayo. So when COVID hit and all the nurses got furloughed, well, there went her business, right? Her self-employment business. So she had to go on unemployment for a little bit. So now the lenders are looking very, very, very carefully, and they're scrutinizing every single dollar that's in her account and whatnot. So she wants to sell her place and buy a bigger house. What happens, and she's pre-approved for a fair amount, what happens if her clients catch wind that she's moving and they all find different daycare providers? And 3 days before closing, she's lost 3 clients because they didn't want to travel southwest to drop off their kids. She could then lose the deal because she wouldn't qualify for that loan. So I had to think, okay, in this case, in this scenario, I have to make sure she understands that. So to say, look, Susie Q, if we get an offer, what you're going to have to do is tell your daycare clients, please do not leave me until after I close. You can line something up somewhere else, but please do not take your kids and start at another place until after I close, or I will not qualify for a loan. Does that make sense? So you always have to be anticipating what are the unique situations that my buyers or sellers are in, and line them up, or educate them or advise them to make sure that your deal stays together, right? You want to bulletproof that transaction, okay? So, and some of that is just you talk through it with somebody who has been there before and can anticipate a few of the problems you might run into, all right? Okay. So we know that we're going to, if there's a counter offer, we're going to verbally do that between the agents before we put it all in writing. And then hopefully you guys, you come to an agreement, right? Where the next step then is now we get an inspection and we negotiate those terms as well. When you're doing an inspection, make sure you advise your buyers. Now look, when you're buying a house, you're not buying a new construction here. So we're looking for safety or money pit or structure issues, right? Every house is going to have Saturday do it list kind of things. Depending on the ability of that buyer is probably going to determine what kind of a list you ask the sellers to do, right? I had a buyer where the dad was a contractor. They didn't ask for anything because the dad was like, I can totally do that. I can do that. And then I had another buyer who was like 4 feet tall. And there were things that that person just couldn't reach or do or take care of. So we would ask for different things, right? So, just walk in with the right expectations with that. At the end of the day, you guys, best case scenario, everybody walks away feeling like, seller walks away feeling like, yep, I got what I wanted. Buyer walks away feeling like, yep, I got what I wanted. Okay. And you're really going to have to read those buyers and sellers. What is a win for them? Sometimes a win means I feel like I got a deal somewhere. Sometimes a win is, nothing short of asking price. So you have to really navigate and be a student of your buyer and seller, and go from there, right? So go from there. Do you guys have any questions right now? Because we're just about done here. Obviously, we can't break into groups and present to each other. Any questions before we wrap it up? Okay, on the screen right now, one of the most important fundamentals in business as well within one's personal life is the decision not only to make commitments, but to keep them. Mo Anderson. So with that, let's jump in, do our calls, all of our lead gen. If you guys have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. If you need resources, say, Carrie, what do you have for this? I was a teacher before I was a real estate agent, so I've got like checklists for things and all kinds of stuff. So don't hesitate to reach out. I know there are a lot of other agents in the office as well. So if you don't have any questions or you want me to stay on or you reach out separately, feel free to do that. But otherwise, we are going to call it a wrap. And congrats to those of you who have just had closings and written some deals. That's awesome. But are we good?
We're good, but I do want to reach out to you eventually and get some of those scripts that, or not the scripts, but some of your checklists and stuff that you had today. Yeah, absolutely. Those were awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Let me see. I'll put them on our Keller Williams Facebook page. How about that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Them, and then you guys can just jump in and copy them. They're branded to us, but the content is, it's good stuff. And you can Google stuff too. I know that if you look in Command, in fact, I just took some things off. Like Command has got some stuff too that you could print off or you could personalize. So be looking at some of that stuff as well in design in Command. But anyway, like I say, I was pre-Command and these probably look a little prettier than mine, but it's the idea of you sure look like the agent who has thought through how to serve your client well when you walk in with some resources like that. So, okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Talk to you later, you guys.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.